Hello and welcome to another Times Radio Members Question and Answer. Now today we're answering comments from our channel members on Frontline episodes and other videos about the war in Ukraine and its impact on the world stage. I'm Philip Ingram. I present Frontline, or I'm one of the presenters of Frontline, but I'm a former senior British military intelligence officer and commentator on all matters geopolitics, defence, security, cyber, terrorism, or anything else that people want me to do. First and foremost, a very happy new year to all of you. And if you haven't signed up for Times Radio membership and you didn't get it as part of a Christmas present, sign up now. It'll give you early access to everything, and you can get your comments in and ask your questions for me to deal with on this very programme. Now, let's go straight into it. First point comes from Marty. Happy New Year to you, Marty. You say, just funny how corruption runs so deep in the Russian system that millions, if not billions, end up in private pockets rather than giving Putin a reliable picture of the situation in Ukraine before 2022. Marty, you're talking the obvious here. There's two sets of government in Russia. There's the official one that everyone goes out there with, the president and the prime minister and people in parliament and different ministerial appointees and all the rest of it. That hasn't got any real power. The real power is the criminal government that underpins it. It's the oligarchs, those that influence, those that control different parts of the business and different business empires, with the oligarch in chief, Vladimir Putin, being the person who's the kingpin holding it all together. And of course, the oligarchs don't want to give the kingpin anything that will suggest that they are not in favour and they're not having success, because he might just force them to take up window cleaning, as we've seen happen to a few of them, and fall out the 9th floor window. And that's the way things work. So in a dictatorship, if a dictator dictates by fear, which they all do, then that fear will mean that the dictator's not going to get a realistic picture. And unless he's got a very strong right-hand man or woman that will give him the reality, then we're in a game of Chinese whispers where things will get exaggerated, and that's very clear what happened here, and has continued to happen. And the more and more Putin withdraws and becomes isolated, the more he's going to make bad decisions because he hasn't got the right information. Not that he made good decisions when he did have the right information, but no, very fair point. Next point comes from Hal. And you're asking about the alleged Ukrainian drone strike on Putin, and you say, going forward, could this be construed by the Kremlin as an attempted assassination? Trump will be sympathetic, obviously. The Kremlin will use this pretext as justification for assassination of President Zelensky or another world leader. Several interesting points in there, Hal. Could it be used by the Kremlin as an attempted assassination? I think that's one of the lines that they've taken. And they've clearly had Trump's sympathy. But then since then, we've had the CIA come out and say there's no intelligence that any Ukrainian drones went anywhere near the Russian presidential palace, never mind whenever Vladimir Putin was in there. So the Kremlin were using it as a pretext for something. But because that detail has come out into the public domain, they haven't really done that something. I think they would stop at an assassination attempt on President Zelensky or another world leader, but they'd go for someone else fairly high profile. But it shows Russian disinformation. We have to ask, why have they done something like this that is so easy to disprove? Is it a sign of desperation? Probably. The Russians have an unwritten way of doing things, which is called varanya, literally translates as lying or lies. They'll quite happily tell a lie knowing that nobody believes it, but they don't care. We saw the same thing when the two GRU officers, Colonels Chepiga and Mishkin, were interviewed by RT.com about their visit to Salisbury whenever there was the assassination attempt on Sergei Skripal, the Russian intelligence officer, or former intelligence officer that turned British spy who was living there. And of course, these two GRU officers said that they only went to Salisbury for an hour because they wanted to see the famous spire. And they couldn't stay there because the snow was too deep. One of them came from Siberia. The snow was less than 3 or 4 millimeters and had already thawed. But they stayed in Salisbury for 1 hour. They knew that was going to be a lie. They knew the world would take it as a lie, but they said it anyway. It's a normal way of doing business in Russia. Next point comes from Lars. Lars, the more complex systems will reach maturity in 2026 for Ukraine. Going from a guy in a shed to battlefield effectiveness takes time. I think we'd be surprised by Ukraine's ingenuity in all levels. Unfortunately, Russia's total lack of dignity. And Lars, I think you're referring to the sea drones and the other drones that Ukraine is using, whether it be in the front line with unmanned ground vehicles that are having some success, the drones that are being used in the front line, or the more long-range drones and long-range cruise missiles and Ukraine's ballistic missiles. And yep, you're 100% right. Ukraine has come on leaps and bounds in 2025. It's going to get even further in 2026. And we have to remember, putting US support to one side, support from the EU and Europe, we're talking of $22.25 trillion worth of economic backing to Russia's $2.3 trillion of economic backing. One can outbid the other and outspend the other. And that's what is going to happen, provided the EU and the coalition of the willing continue to support Ukraine, which I think they will do. Add in the United States to that, and it's another magnitude of economic support, even bigger. Back to Marty again. Marty, you say, good remark there about the basic obsolescence of big battleships unless they serve higher purpose like carriers. Viewing the announced Trump-class ships from the US makes it just hilarious and feels like Spanish Armada from back in the day. Yeah, Marty, I think a lot of people around the world are smiling at Donald Trump's Trump-class battleships being the biggest and the best. Everything he wants is the biggest and the best. We'll not get into the detail or the rabbit hole where that conversation could go. But Trump knows full well that the design for these wouldn't even be finished by the time his presidency is finished. So the chances of them actually being built and floating are virtually nil. However, there is a very valid point in what you're saying here, and something that I want to bring out. We should not necessarily learn the lessons of how warfare is going to be in the future by how warfare is happening in Ukraine, either from the Ukrainian side or from the Russian side, because Ukraine doesn't have an all-arms capability. It doesn't have a balanced naval capability. It doesn't have a balanced air support. Russia is not using its military in the same way that the Western forces would use their military. There are lessons we have to learn, the importance of drone technology, whether it be naval drones, airborne drones, or now unmanned ground vehicles, and the integration of those into our counter-threat capabilities, but also into our offensive capabilities. But it doesn't mean that the way we do business as an all-arms and an all-arms joint capability is completely obsolete. It has never been done in Ukraine. It has never been used in Ukraine. So its effectiveness is something that cannot be analysed in that scenario. So we shouldn't throw the baby out with the bathwater just because there's no bathwater in with the baby at the minute. Okay, so final point comes from Walter. Walter, you says, Russian iron sources and smelting factories need to be taken out. Walter, you're 100% right. They do need to be taken out. A very clever way of taking them out is to make sure that they can't get any power. And a very clever way of making sure they can't get any power is to destroy the oil and gas refineries and the electrical substations that are around the place. And that's what Ukraine is doing. But I agree with you. The iron sources and smelting factories do need to be taken out. Russia would still get support, though, from China. And China's got huge amounts of smelting capability. But it's something that we could sanction away out of the place. But I do like your thinking. So anyway, thanks for watching this week's question and answer and posting your questions. Remember, if you want exclusive access to Times Radio Frontline and to have your questions answered, please sign up for Times Radio Frontline membership. And of course, you can get us on your favourite podcast channels now. Just search for Times Radio Frontline. Thank you. Goodbye.